We will call to order the September 10th meeting of District 99 Board of Education. Call the roll, please.
Bill White.
Here.
Julie Beckman.
Here.
Deb Boyle.
Here.
Mike Davenport.
Here.
Nancy Kupka.
Here.
Keith Mattoon.
Here.
Terry Kavasich.
Here.
Okay, let us rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, this evening is a board workshop meeting. The first item on the agenda are the 2012-2013 district goals. Dr. McDonald, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Mr. White. And as we were looking at this one more time this morning, we noticed that in the final preparation, we had lopped off a couple of key points. So you have a paper copy, and Joanne, in the last 5 minutes or so, has entered, I believe,
Yes, the revised.
the revised, but you'll probably, if you're already on your, already on board docs, you probably have to click out of that and go back to it, because that's what I had to do to get
Oh,
that.
did you? Yeah. Because I took the other one out.
Right.
I removed the other one.
Excuse me.
So I'll start this with a little bit of a history lesson, and this would also reinforce what Dr. Tia discussed with the board self-evaluation a couple weeks ago. Several years ago, the board decided that it would operate on the basis of annual goals. And board further decided that in order to do that effectively, it would have to develop a strategic plan. That plan, the development of that plan took place over a 1.5 year time, beginning in the fall of 2010. And more than a year's time. It was finally approved by the board in October of 2011. And based on that plan then, for the 2011-12 school year, the administration recommended a set of annual goals for that year that would address the key components, or many of the key components of the strategic plan. And we worked on those throughout the year, and at the July board meeting, we presented a final report on our work on those goals during the year. So we completed the first cycle. And now we are, in a sense, beginning the next cycle with recommended goals for the 2012-2013 school year. Now, in the interest of recent discussions with the board about trying to streamline meetings, it would not be my goal to go through every one of these items, but I will if you ask me to, or I will comment on any one that you ask me to. But a different strategy, at least going in, is that just to basically go through each one of the, we have actually 7 strategic areas in the strategic plan. This set of recommended goals addresses 6. And what I would propose to do is to look at each area, highlight maybe 1 or 2 tasks or goal areas that we want to highlight to the board because you haven't heard about them before. And then answer any questions about other areas that you may have questions about that we're not going to necessarily cover. Because I think what you'll find if you look at this and look at what we did last year, there's quite a bit of continuation, and that's a good thing in a couple different ways. One, because the purpose of this is to focus on a set of challenges or issues for a period of time and do them well. And 2, in many cases, achieving a successful outcome takes multiple years, not just one. And so I think it's a good thing that this is, in many ways, builds on what we did last year, but also has some changes in store for next year. And of course, the purpose of presenting this evening, and not in a single presentation at the September board meeting, is that if there are things that the board thinks we need to add or adjust, we have between now and next Monday to change those, or at least sometime later this week when the board packet goes out. So we are looking for the board's input tonight. If there are things that you believe we need to change or to consider differently, then we have the time to do that. Okay, the first area, Strategic Area 1, Curriculum Instruction Assessment. I think if you look through these, the vast majority of these are things that we began work on last year. And our work last year was either to define what they were or to set the stage for pursuing them or to take the initial steps in developing them. But I would like to focus on item 1.1b. We're talking about the AVID program. And I've asked Judy Miner to talk a little bit about that because she's a bit of an expert on it. So Judy, could you please share some insight about the AVID program and why we're interested in it and what we're trying to do with it?
Thank you, Dr. McDonald. It's kind of, if you want to take a look at 1.1a, 1.1b, and 1.2a, AVID is sandwiched in between, and that's a beautiful way to explain and give an overview of what the program is. AVID stands for Achievement via Individual Determination. It's a system of support that is, according to 1.1a, a Tier 2 system of support for specific groups of students. The focus is to get students who are in the middle, in the most rigorous levels of AP and honors courses, so that by the time they finish their 4 years in District 99, they will have had experience at least one AP course. You'll also notice that it will focus on students who are traditionally underrepresented in AP courses, as well as underserved. This year, we're in a planning year. There are coordinators at each of the buildings. I'm working with them, as well as site teams will be set up for the purposes of working with these students in a protracted, focused way so that they learn the kinds of skills on how to navigate the American school system with regards to getting into college and career, writing, inquiry, reading, organizational skills, as well as the whole reading piece. So it dovetails with a lot of things that we're currently doing, but we want to extend it to how do we bump up those kids in the middle to get into the most rigorous courses, which will in fact then help raise our AP numbers.
Any questions?
I have one. What do you mean when you say underserved?
Underserved, as we've looked at our data, there are student, and you'll see under 1.2a subgroups, there are student groups for whom they don't have as much of a representation in AP and honors courses. We figure that's an area that is ripe for us to make sure students have the ability to access the courses, but the kinds of interventions, the short-term types of interventions, they really need more help, consistent help, overt teaching of skills. They might be the first in their home to go to college potentially. So they will have the ability to learn those kinds of skills in a consistent way, in a daily means through an elective class. And that takes planning and time, and that's what we're focused on this year.
I think another way to put it is we're looking for students who, without a push, would not be going to college.
Right.
Did not be interested in college, or if they were going to college, they would decide to go to COD, but not make any plans prior to COD. And the purpose is because there was quite a bit of research out there that shows a correlation between students who take AP or honors courses or weighted courses and students who enter into or enroll in four-year colleges. The purpose of this program is to encourage students who wouldn't necessarily do that to do so, and to provide them a support system so when they do enroll in difficult courses, they have an opportunity to achieve. So that really is the basis for this program.
How do we select those, though, when they're just freshmen? I mean, how does that selection process take place? I mean, how do you know who to select?
There is a selection rubric that represents the tenets of the AVID system. Typically, there are students in the middle, so usually from a 2.0 to a 3.5 grade point average. We already have supports in place for those at the very highest end. We also have supports for students at the lowest end. So this attends to those students in the middle. Additionally, there are students who have individual determination. They want to do better, but they might not have that at-home support or the knowledge set to know how. So it's a means by which they are receiving ongoing supports in addition to what we currently have. But those are some of the criteria that are used.
Thank you.
Sure.
You probably get input from the counselors and that at the feeder districts.
Definitely. The work
That would really help you identify those students.
We, in fact, within the next 2 months, we're already working with our student support services, assistant principals, to set up an articulation date to explain what the program entails so that they know what the profile of those students, and then that outreach to both students and parents, because students need to apply. Again, it's that individual determination. I want to do better.
I just wanted to make a point that I've had several parents over the last year or so approach me and say, you know, you're doing great things for the students at both ends of the spectrum, but those ones in the middle, I wish we could do more. And so I think this directly addresses that that desire on the part of a lot of parents. And I think this will be very welcome moving forward. So thank you.
Board have any other questions on curriculum instruction and assessment?
1.4A.
Okay.
Math 1 curriculum. Maybe if we could hear a little more about that.
Well, I'll start, and Dr. Miner, you can fill in. The Math 1 curriculum is really the first course in the Common Core Standards curriculum in mathematics. Right. And I believe we had a presentation to the board earlier, or in the last school year, about that in terms of being a more rigorous course, being a more in-depth math course instead of more topics, more intense study of lesser topics, and additional integration of different kinds of problem solving and thinking skills associated with mathematics. And the intent, I believe it's required, in fact, that we have this course ready for next year. Our intent, though, we have our math department heads, Dr. Miner, our associate principals, actually spent a lot of time last school year working on it. The intent is to have this course up and running and with all the support systems necessary in August of 2013. So Dr. Miner, what did I miss in that explanation?
Very succinct. Just a point of information, within the next 2 weeks, there's going to be math articulation with our sender district so they understand. District 58 is currently doing Common Core this year, so once the kids graduate from 8th grade, they will now just continue with Common Core next year at 9th grade, and that was something that was fundamental. Our math chairs, as you know, had been part of those conversations with their boards. So Common Core is here.
Once again, I've had some feedback from parents. I know this is something in a lot of people's minds, dealing with in the middle school level and coming to high school, all the changes that are happening with Common Core, and parents keep hearing about it. So I like the fact, this is good emphasis on the fact that we're coordinating with our feeder districts and working through all these yield.
Could you speak a little more about the feeder districts outside of 58?
Well, the articulation that we have, we've invited all of our sender districts so they have access to understanding what types of steps we've already taken. Also, certainly, the instructional pieces that are required, because some districts are farther along than others, so we want to make sure everyone is in the loop, and certainly we want to keep those lines of communication open.
So how do we manage that when a district, when some of our feeder districts are split?
I know that there's been a lot of outreach on the part of our math chairs with individual districts. They had started that last year in anticipation of what was happening. And in my interviews with each of them, they're planning to have ongoing discussions with them as needed. So as we get closer to the rollout, that'll be another communication piece that we want to continue to enhance. Additionally, I'd like to, Jill's going to help, and we're in development of putting together a student learning page on our website. So some of these bigger issues, such as Common Core, we can post on our website, people can have access to, and then that way it helps inform. So that's under construction.
I think, Nancy, though, a concern is we're dealing with 5
Yeah.
different entities. The fact is that each one is, different place may be sort of a trendy term, but not every district is as well planned and articulated as all the others are. So the fact of the matter is, as much as I believe we have been available to work with the elementary districts, and each one of them is addressing the issue in its own way, I believe there will be some gaps between what they're doing and what we're doing, at least at the onset, and that is a concern.
And so with those gaps, are we anticipating some kind of level of remediation, something in advance that lets parents and students know coming in from the various center districts?
I believe our intent is to provide a level of remediation. In fact, we've added staff and the mathematics faculties at both campuses for that purpose. Frankly, we anticipate some level of remediation for our students no matter where they come in from, because this is there is no more 2-year algebra. 25% of our students are enrolled in 2-year algebra, frankly, or a lower level than beginning algebra. It's not 2 years anymore, but it's a lower level than beginning algebra, what we would consider the mainline college course. And so, given that, and the fact that this is going to be a faster paced, a more intense, a more rigorous program, we're already planning on remediation. Now, the question is how much we have to do, and that is a concern that we have.
Thank you.
Other questions in this area 1? Okay, move to facilities, area 2. And again, I think of most of these are things known to the board. One thing I did want to highlight is 2.3A, develop a master facility plan that meets the requirements of the 21st century learner and teacher. And I'm going to have Mr. Schock talk about this a little bit and where we intend to be at the end of the year with it.
The timeline for this goal is 2013, 2014. However, we would like to do some background work in preparation for working on the plan and completing the plan next fiscal year. The master facility plan has some connectivity to one of the goals, that 2.3B, that we're working on right now, and that's the development of the facility maintenance plan. Some of the work in that planning process includes evaluation and surveying of our facilities, understanding of the condition of our facilities, and some of that information, some of that data will transfer to the master facility plan. Because of that transfer of information, it makes sense to us to use the consultants that we use in development of the maintenance plan in the master facility plan also. So we're not duplicating work, we're using the same people and transferring that data over. The other reason for that, a little more self-serving maybe for me, is because of my retirement next summer. I'd like to get that plan started so that it's headed in the direction that we've talked about for so many years, and there will be some continuity then when I hand that off and someone else takes over the reins for me. So whoever that lucky person is, they'll be able to step right in and move right ahead with that plan and not get bogged down in details.
Any questions about Keith?
Question. Mr. Schock, I know a little bit different, but when we take a look at 2.1C, where it says address tier 2, subject to board approval, make recommendations for the next group of capital projects. When I looked at number 4 under finances, I didn't see necessarily investigation of a revenue stream to be able to address some of those things. Were we planning on addressing it here under 2 point something or under 4 point something where it has finances?
We can talk about it now, Mark, or?
Well, I think it's going to be subject to, first, I think that the tier 2, all that funding has been the Woodridge property. And so it's really finishing the tier 1 projects and seeing what residuals left, because there'll be some dollars left over, and then looking at the prioritizations of the project left in tier 2, and then dealing with, okay, do we need more dollars to do what's essential, or do we agree on just doing what we have the funds to do? I think that's a decision once we know exactly what we have left. We have something up in the air here with multi-needs that could play into that as well, so there's a few pieces that have to fall into place before we can make a recommendation.
I just think adding some kind of fiscal piece, whether it's under 2.1C or maybe somewhere under 4 point, under the financial part, just to say, and we will also address, I think, the financial revenue part, I think would be very helpful. Where it states exactly what you just said.
So it's just clear that it's Woodridge.
Instead of this is our pie in the sky, what we want to do and take a look, but it's also, and then we'll also see the revenue aspects as well to see if they're.
Maybe if lengthen that sentence, make recommendations for the next group of capital projects along with necessary funding to accomplish or something in that vein.
Absolutely.
Good point.
Just because I think that'll be a good reminder for all of us.
Mark, did I understand you to say, though, that Tier 2 is pretty much funded by the Woodridge property money? So we would make that
Well,
clear.
it's to look at those Tier 2 items and see how far it will go.
See how far it will go.
And then certainly bring to the board the items that aren't being recommended or that we don't have funding for, and deciding how critical that how would we go about funding those if we decide they're necessary at this time. So
I don't want to put, Keith, Mr. Machine, you can tell me if I capture your intent here. I suspect that what you're asking for, and it's something I would support doing, is a discussion in the upcoming year about to what extent the board and or the community would be interested in non-traditional revenue streams to support some of the Tier 2.
I didn't have that in mind specifically. I think that's something that would probably be advantageous for us to visit. But it was mostly to say, make sure that we understand as a board what is left over in the Woodridge property and how much can be used, and then do we need to look at some alternative, aspects of that.
Not from the point of view that we would commit to do it.
Right. Correct.
But to evaluate the extent to which the board and or the community might support various non-traditional methods of financing things, either yes or no.
I had one on 2.2A. I thought maybe there might be some mention of the facilities manager that we were looking to bring into all of this, and how we make our facilities available to the community. And so I'm wondering where are we at on that, and should that be part of this in terms of the measurement?
Well, we've employed a facility manager for about 10
it's been 11 months, somewhere in that range.
And I believe we could make a report about the facility usage.
Right. I think we just haven't agreed on what meeting to do it. I think we could do it in the fall here, easily October or November. Maybe November, because I might not be here in October.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
Because we said we were going to assess it after a year.
I'll throw out one more issue, I guess, in 2.3A. As part of the master facility plan, something I'd be interested in hearing about is a more formalized sort of campus equity audit, that we can find some formal system of evaluating whether the facilities at the two campuses are essentially or substantially comparable, which is certainly my goal as a policy matter. So it's not just a matter of intuition or common sense or what you think, but some formalized process of evaluating whether the students at both campuses are being substantially equally served with by their respective facilities.
I'd support
And
that.
we might very well be there, but
Right.
but a more formalized process to be able to document that for the community, because there are certain people that complain all the time, and they may or may not have a point.
These are all helpful comments.
2 schools, 1 community. I mean, you know, and that they get the same level of service at both schools.
But truly, that's the goal.
Many, many years.
So,
But if we have a formalized process as part of the master facilities plan to document that in some rigorous way, then we can say that the professionals looked at it, and here's where one campus is somewhat deficient, you know, North is deficient until recently on land space, you know, so that's.
Well, that's a good
yeah,
idea.
I really like that idea from the standpoint that we're not just looking at each campus independently and where we may need to feel like we need to do some maintenance or things that need to be fixed, but we're looking at it in terms of comparing the two and saying which level, you know, where do we really need to do some things to
can't be
bring
identical,
something
but-
up. Right. Equality is impossible, I think, ultimately.
Equality.
But if we don't try to work towards that end, we're never going to get close. So, anyhow.
These are helpful. Any other comments about facilities? Okay, Area 3, technology. As the board is aware, last spring we purchased individual devices for each staff member. Additionally, during the first week of staff attendance, we had some rather intensive training available for everyone using these devices, and I'm going to ask Rod to talk a little bit more about that and where we're going from here with it.
Thanks, Mark. Absolutely. There's a tremendous amount of excitement in the buildings right now, starting with the infrastructure upgrade last year, tablets in computers' hands, in teachers' hands, tablet computers in their hands toward the end of the year. And then, as Mark said, the Teacher Institute days this year, a portion of one of those days was dedicated to technology training. And it was fantastic, really. Teachers teaching teachers. Just generated a tremendous amount of excitement. And the 2 items that are up here on the goals are very related to each other. Professional development is related to everything. But in this case, there's so much excitement going on that we really don't want to wait until we go through the plan development process and all of that. We're meeting this week, actually, to look at exit surveys that we did from the trainings at the beginning of school to see what teachers were looking for, what they like, what things came out of that. Using that and other information to just do some trainings very quickly here to capitalize on that excitement. And as this goal states, we would intend to continue that throughout the year and get a good feel for what our participation levels are, and more importantly, how is it being used to make sure that it's effective in that way, and then build off of that. The second item that's listed here, 31C, refers to a lot of the strategic planning information from way back when all that was put together. It just was all over the board, really. Technology was a major part of a lot of things, and it pointed in a lot of different directions. And out of that, it became quite clear that we just need to bring that back together in some form of a plan. What I've been saying for years, that technology is only a tool, is we're well here these days. Look at anybody with their iPads and iPhones and other things. They're not interested in learning about exactly how it works. They just want to push the button and have it do
Make
the
it work.
things for them. So the visioning and goal-setting activities up there will be critical in that to show us what do we need technology to help us do, and then we can develop a plan around that and go from there.
It's pretty exciting.
Question I have about this, and I'm not sure, maybe it's included in this, maybe it isn't, is the extent to which educating students on the use of technology is included within the comprehensive plan under 31C, because this is sort of synergy between number 3 and number 1. My recollection is we were talking about looking at developing standards where the ability to use personal technology is integrated into all of the existing curriculum without a separate class being on it. And I'm just curious if that's part of what we're talking about here, or would that be something different?
I think part of that, Bill, might be, last year, we had a group that worked on looking at the NET standards, which are national standards for technology in schools. They deal with standards at the administrative level, at the teacher level, and at the student level. And some of that, I think, would play right into that in terms of what are the standards that we want students to be able to attain in terms of their use and their application of technology. Out of that would probably come what do we need to do to help them get there. And that would certainly be rolled into that planning and goal setting process.
Okay.
Other questions about technology? Resources, personnel, staff development, finances, and as I said in the document you received Friday, 4.4A and 4.4B were inadvertently lopped off in the process of cutting and pasting. Since those are about money, those are pretty important. But one of the things that I wanted to highlight in this area, something that was mentioned or stated in the strategic plan, but not necessarily something we focused on last year, was a program to support and promote national board certification for our teachers, which is, national board certification is a very prestigious credential. We only at this point have a handful of teachers in our district that have that credential. And we believe in order to get more, we have to focus on this and create a program for it. And I've asked Dr. Smith to speak a little bit about this tonight to give the board a sense of what we're trying to accomplish.
And, pardon me, Dr. Miner and I attended a conference last year on how to set up your own district program. Dr. Miner's had experience launching a program I launched in my last district, and so we both received some additional training at a different level on how to support a program when you bring it in district. So last year was a learning year, and because of the effort, we need to really do it and do it right. It was put off last year while we continued to talk, and we also talked about national board as we bargained and actually have contract language to support the process. And we were delighted that the teachers seemed excited by that, and already I've probably had at least a dozen emails, people reading contracts, when are we going to find out more about it? And because we only have a small handful in the district of nationally board certified teachers, generally teachers know of it, but they really don't understand what it's involved, what it means, what the process looks like. So we have our official contact now as far as our regional coordinator. I have lunch with her in 2 weeks, and then we'll frame up the year. National Board Certification in Illinois has a set of timelines on when the application process opens. The registration is about $2,600 or $2,700 to just begin the process. The state has been subsidizing 2,000 of the $2,600 or $2,700. We'll hope that that's federal money that the state gets. So typically that 2,000 has been available for the first so many applicants. What that number is just depends on how much money is filtered through to the state. The other piece that we added in negotiations was that other $600, $700 odd when the teachers do complete the process. Part of the recognition would be to reimburse them for that extra $600 or $700 out-of-pocket expense. So we'll start with some informational meetings right away in the fall and early winter. And then for teachers that we've piqued their interest, we'll have a different level of meetings to help them understand different ways that they can earn their national board certification. They have a full program that will take about 1.5 years for most teachers to complete the program, and then they have a little teaser program where you can take a take one or a part of the process, and you can work through what will take you about 4 or 5 months to complete. But it gives you a real taste for what that full certification process will look like. And if teachers go through take one and they pass their take one, if they want to continue with the process, and they can apply that initial module or take one toward their full certification. So it's a pretty involved process. Once we find out which teachers were selected to move forward, there's a mentoring program that is put in place, and there are videos, and there's a lot of time, and there's miking teachers up for their video clips that have to be sent in that are rated by national board raters. So it's an extremely complex process, and when teachers achieve it, it really is something we should all recognize as the highest standard in teaching. So we're excited to launch and to move forward with being a high school district that has many, many, many of our teachers nationally board certified. So.
Lisa, you mentioned it's in the contract. Is there going to be, besides, I think it's wonderful if we can subsidize, the cost to them, will be a bump on the salary schedule as well?
It will be, the national board at the end of the process recognizes 9 graduate credit hours for all of the hours you're putting into the process. For most of our staff members, that 9 can be obviously applied toward a lane change. If they're already at the top of our lane changes, then there's a one-time $2,000 stipend in recognition for the achievement.
Are there certain minimums? Do they have to have a master's already in order to
they have
be
to have
eligible
so many
for
years
the program?
teaching experience. I don't believe they have to hold a master's, though.
Oh, okay.
I'm not certain that they have to hold a master's, but if I find out otherwise, I will share.
Yeah.
So you're saying a first-year teacher can't walk in and say, I'd really like to do this?
No, they have to have so much experience.
Would make sense, right? I remember when...
It's rigorous. I've had teachers in my last 2 districts go through it, and it's not an easy process.
We had a report from a couple
Mr.
of people who had done it here.
Ago, I think it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was...
Our music chairs. Both
That's
have
right.
it.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
Yeah.
Okay, are there additional questions on Area 4?
Do we have any sense of success from 41A? I know we
Yes.
met with some people and there was some discussion,
Well,
but I don't know who we
in the sense
hired.
of we've kept track about the number of minority persons that we interviewed for jobs and the number of minority persons we hired. I believe we hired 4. 5.
Cool. Very good.
And what in the past years has been our, that's an
I'd be happy
improvement?
to go back and pull its improvement.
It's improvement is fine.
I think some years in the past, the answer would have been we didn't hire any minority persons. But we can go back and find that information.
No,
I'm
whatever, it's fine.
I'm very glad.
Other questions about Area 4? Okay, Area 5, communications. And what the board is aware, we've done a lot of different communications work over the past year. But one of the things Mrs. Browning is working on is developing a key communicators group, 5.1B, and I'll have her talk a little bit about that.
One insight from our survey was that word of mouth is really a key way that people hear about things, that media is no longer top of mind to people. So knowing this, it kind of makes sense to cultivate that and bring more community members into our news and to share that with them ahead of time. And so the thought is that a key communicators network would narrow down our broad, 60,000 member community into a smaller subset, and that we would be proactive in sharing messages with them. So give them news tips, news releases ahead of time, ahead of the media, and also just things that are going on maybe just more insight and more in-depth information about that. So we're still working out the mechanics of how this would work, but the thought is that it would be a virtual network, so there'd be no in-person meetings because we also know that people are short on time. So it would just be online, but initially the thought is to reach out to people personally and invite them to be part of this list, and probably starting with the list that we have of community leaders. And I know that all of you have your green cards, so lots of other people have their green cards. So the Chambers of Commerce, our sender districts. So starting with that list and reaching out and asking people to be part of the list, but also broaden that and maybe ask realtors or other business leaders, outspoken critics maybe too, to invite them to be part of it, just to be part of the conversation, really cultivate the conversation. So that's really the idea behind it. We're still working through what this would mean, but the bottom line is to just keep building trust with people and keep building relationships. So I hope that all of you will be on the list, by the way, unless you tell me otherwise. We'll eliminate you.
Oh, I was going to ask, is it an opt-out or an opt-in system?
Only opt-in. You cannot opt out after it. But.
Okay, that's good. You're signed up for life?
So the idea is to not maybe create additional communications at first, but to get it ahead of time, because I think people think we hold the news or not share it immediately. So just make sure that everyone's in the loop.
And that's other than like Facebook or Twitter or something like that?
That would be in addition to, yes.
Other questions about communications? And our final area of focus is innovation adaptation. We began working on both of these, 7.2A and 7.3C, in 2011, 2012. And Mr. Whitehead, I hate to put you on the spot, but could you talk a little bit about 7.2A, since you've been very involved in that?
Sure. Last year, we looked at our counseling and student support services staff and really examined the areas of need and some of the gaps that we may have in service delivery. Along with that, we talked about the RAMP model that's specifically geared for school counselors. That being said, over the summer, both buildings took a task of really examining the way that they deliver services in each building. North decided to look at looking at a needs assessment and kind of looking at the different areas that their counseling student support services, where there were gaps. South decided to work towards looking at the RAMP certification that they'll be applying for in 2013-2014 school year. So they were hard at work this summer, and we'll be discussing the outcome of their reports, and I'll be able to give that to the board as well, so you can hear about some of the work that they did on working towards the different gap analysis for our Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports at both buildings.
Questions about Area 7? Okay, we appreciate the board's input, and those things that you pointed out to us we'll incorporate in the document, and the intent is to approve this formally at the meeting next week.
Such a thorough plan.
Okay, we can move on to item 3B, discussion regarding board business meeting agenda.
All right, time out, Mr. White. I have to.
Time to go.
Put that up there.
Okay, here we go.
Mark's trying to pull it up.
All right.
Oh, he got it.
I hope there is a memo.
Yes, it is on the...
I have it.
Want me to do it up?
And I printed it too, so that
You too.
I would have it.
I wasn't sure we'd have it.
Very well. After, again, the board self-evaluation, and one of the outcomes of that was that the board requested the superintendent consider and write down in a report ways or ideas about making the meetings more efficient. So my colleagues and I met early last week, brainstormed a number of different ideas. Some are not necessarily great ideas, but we brainstormed them, or they're here for you anyway, and it's up to you whether you want to incorporate them or not. But They are all written down for you here, and I'll go over a couple of them briefly because I think a couple do bear some further explanation. One was strict meeting protocol, and my recollection about reading Robert's Rules of Order and some of the components of that, I believe this is part of that, is that in a discussion situation, one very good rule would be, in order to keep the meetings brief, would be to allow every member who has a desire to comment on an issue that the opportunity to do that before anyone comments twice. And further, that when a board member is speaking on an issue, that the understanding is that person will speak without interruption. And while that's sometimes difficult for me to do when I'm in a meeting, I can understand it is a way to discipline the board, and really, Bill, that would fall on his shoulders as a president to sort of police that. But that was one suggestion that came from our discussion. Time limits for reports, and I primarily focusing on the people that work in this office, because our work, our professional work is giving reports to the board, or at least part of it. And we need to be disciplined enough to make those reports in 15 minutes or less. And if a report cannot be made because of the content of it or the time needed to digest something fully, we need to advise the board of that ahead of time. But otherwise, if it's an informational report, Mr. Mattoon made a good point regarding he worked for a political officer, and in a policy environment, it is true you're told you have a brief period of time to present your position, and then that's all the time that person has for you because he or she is busy. So we certainly can discipline ourselves to make our reports to the board in 15 minutes or less. Time box, similar but related concept. Many of the meetings we have here in the district, we assert time limits on. And that has a number of benefits that disciplines us to report as succinctly as possible what we want to report to the board. That also provides the opportunity, if we run out of time, the discussion's continuing, the board can vote to continue the discussion beyond the time frame. It also applies to the meeting itself, assuming, I would say a typical meeting would be a 2-hour meeting, 7:30 to 9:30. And if the meeting if it were to go beyond 9:30, or it looked like it could go beyond 9:30, the board then could decide, yes, we'll go beyond 9:30, or no, we will not, as a concept. Sergeant at Arms would be an informal position on the board that would be appointed for each meeting. The role of that person would be to observe colleagues on the board, and at a point where the board is stuck on an issue, to say, gee, I think we're stuck, I'd like to move on. Individuals have performed that function at different meetings, and acknowledging that it sometimes is a need, and that some people can do that well without rancor or creating rancor among colleagues. That's an idea that just is a fail-safe measure for the board when it is continuing a discussion too long. We had a couple reports that we have done for years, long before my time in the district. In a given month, those could be 40 minutes in a board meeting together. The student perspectives, many of us had a hard time with, because that is a very rich report. It typically is from students who are doing things the board doesn't necessarily see, doesn't read about in the paper, things that the kids are really proud of. However, frankly, sometimes those reports take 30 minutes. So we don't have to do those. Those aren't the board's business. They are a very strong affective piece of the board's work, but not a required piece. So whereas there's quite a bit of hand-wrenching about do we really want to put on the list, we thought fair game, we'll put it on the list. It's about learning. Sometimes that's a staff report. Sometimes it isn't, and it does fall more into the category of things the board should know about, but not necessarily things they have to know about. Alternatively, we could do It's About Learning at board workshops instead of board business meetings, which occur earlier in the evening and so forth. So that would be those can go to 30 minutes too. So that's another way to save time in the business meetings. Quarterly financial reports, we're not suggesting we don't have quarterly reports, we're suggesting we don't present quarterly reports to save time. And Mr. Stalen had the sense of the history of these reports such that there was a time when the board's finances were not as strong as they currently are, and the board was concerned at a level they wanted almost regular feedback about that information in a public setting. We would, the idea is we continue to provide those reports for the board, but not necessarily make them as public presentations. We talked about presenting bid approvals on the consent agenda. And of course, on the consent agenda, if the board member has a question about the bid can be taken off the consent agenda easy enough. That's a very both the quarterly report and the bids in the regular approval process are very strong transparency components. But again, if they're going to be slam dunk issues, they can be taken off and are not addressed publicly, or they can be addressed in the consent agenda. And finally, and this will come to play next Monday night, since we have quite a bit of policy work to bring to you. Policies don't need to be done in a roll. They don't need to be done in a roll call vote. Is that correct, Joanne? They can be done by a voice vote. That will save some time. So these are a set of things that we're bringing to you, and at this point, we really want to hear from you about which you would be interested in pursuing or not, or others.
Could I, a quick question about the policy vote. If we're on second reading and we're voting to approve a policy, could that be put on a consent agenda or no?
That's my question. That I don't know.
I'm not
You
sure
lump them
either.
together in an omnibus fashion.
I'm sorry?
Board's president?
We can look that up before the next
If
meeting.
it's for second reading.
Consent agenda for approval?
Or just lump together, not necessarily on
Or put them all
consent
together, if it's
agenda.
on second reading,
On
and
second
you've
reading,
had
do an
no,
omnibus, right.
no
I believe it
comments
could be
about
put
it.
on consent.
Could be?
I would think so, 'cause- and then if anybody had any
Roll
question
call,
about one,
but
you can
it's
always
gonna
pull
be
one out,
consent,
just like we
yeah.
did it
Yeah,
on any other thing.
there might be Illinois statutory issues. That could be the.
Right, right.
I mean, I have
Sorry.
no policy reason against it, but, yeah.
Well, we
Right.
can investigate that, I'm sure.
A suggestion for items 7 and 8 both, maybe certain people can tell me what they think about this. I really do like the idea of a verbal report for the transparency purposes. But
I do too.
To put you on the spot, to put you on the spot, Mr. Stalen, what if you recorded a 15-minute video the Friday before and we put it up on the web?
Or maybe released it there, I don't know.
Or a
if I
5-minute
can-
video. I mean, to provide a verbal explanation of the document, whereas,
I have no problem with the production of that. The only thing is that there might be a timing issue.
Okay.
The cutoff of the board, the monthly reports, sometimes we just make the board report.
The idea being that you record the same presentation that you would have made to the board, perhaps even go a little bit, because Mr. McToon was exactly right, that for those board members who fully read all the materials in advance, you're kind of rehashing what we already know. Yet from a transparency point of view, for the public to hear the explanation is extremely valuable.
Yeah.
Yes.
So those are the
I agree.
conflicting.
May I suggest one thing, though, as we do this? Maybe it would be helpful if we just went through and that we're not skipping over. We could just start with one and move on down the
Maybe we
line.
should finish up what we're doing here and then and then go ahead and do that, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, several of these, it would be easier to make a decision if we could, as we talked about in the board self-evaluation, is work towards getting our agendas and board packet to us a week in advance of the meeting so that we can be sure and review these things, because I don't mind putting some of these on the consent agenda, but I'd like to have them in enough time to read them, ask questions if we need to, because sometimes if we get them on a Thursday, there's not enough time with vacations or something that, you know, people take, and that to get the answers that we need. Did we, or was that discussed with the rest of the staff, that would, whether that could be done?
No, I did not discuss that.
Okay. I'm just throwing that out there because we did discuss that in the board self-evaluation, and I think that some of these things would be easier dealt with if that was the case.
Dr. McDonald, is, off the top of your head, does a full week before the meeting, is that limiting? Joanne, should we ask our board secretary?
Yeah,
You know, I have trouble getting the
Well,
stuff that they needed.
it's the issue, I mean, at a certain point, we establish deadlines for information due and when the packet's put together. So whether the deadline is Wednesday or the Monday before, from that standpoint, a deadline's a deadline. Now, the other issue is the timeliness of the information.
That was my question.
That could be, in some situations, that could be problematic.
Okay.
So,
The other
we
thing,
did not discuss, honestly, that's not something we discussed.
we also talked about the possibility, though, of not having to wait until everything was assembled
One thing at a
to start to
Oh, that's
disseminate
true.
the information.
Yeah.
So as things become available, it might be possible to package up some and then follow with a couple more items. In the board docs, create some possibilities that way that maybe didn't exist so much prior to that. That was something that we talked about.
My concern, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mike.
It's okay.
One, that goes public. Once I activate it, everybody sees it. So, I mean, it wouldn't be just the board seeing those reports. It would be, the whole world would be able to see those reports.
So you couldn't post anything unless that item was final? You don't need the whole agenda, but any one item?
No, I could, I can't post one item at a time. I guess what we could do if the board wanted to do it this way, there's a way to make things private, where only the board can see them. But then...
Then release it on Thursday night,
But then I would have
like-
to go
You have
back,
to make
and
sure
I
that
would then have to go
it's
back
done.
on Thursday and make it public so that the entire world could see it. Because like, for example, the personnel pages, only the board and administration sees
Right.
those. The public can't see that. That's not something the public is privy to. So, I mean, there is a way to do that if that's what you want to do. You can do that. I just have to remember to change it back.
One more thing to remember.
And I guess the other issue too,
Somebody will call me on it if I don't do it.
I would say 90% of what's on the board agenda,
It's public.
we'll be able to tell you what's on that agenda in September of 2013 and September of 2014. But there is about 10% that is dynamic and changes, and there are times when we add to the agenda
That day.
between the Monday of the week the packet's due and we send the packet. And so the farther back we push the deadline for the packet materials to you, that will affect our flexibility. I do understand the interest in having information longer and being able to look at it longer.
We
I
can,
understand that.
the thing, we can always add, I mean, because they can refresh and just every time they go in, if we've added an item, they'll see that item has been added. So, I mean, I don't see that as much of an, I mean, I understand where you're coming from and he's right. I mean, I could tell you what the agenda's going to be for when I leave. We roll things over from year to year. But, I mean, I think it's something that we could talk about, and I don't think it's impossible to do that. It's the deadlines that are more.
And we'd probably have to revise the agenda when things come up that require closed session, for example.
Right.
Then we'd have to be able to revise it periodically during the week before.
I think mostly the board's concern was when we have large chunks of information, whether it's a budget, whether it's a comprehensive plan, whether it's something that we need to take some time, if we can get that sooner than later, I think would be advantageous. And if there are updates, I think we talked about, a quick email on Friday, from Joanne or from the superintendent, hey, here's a quick update if you want to check, before the weekend. But I think there's probably some kind of chunk, whether it's 60%, 70%, that's probably set in stone prior to those updates, I would think. And then if there are, 25% or so, I think we're very flexible with that.
Even an extra day, even if we had a Wednesday rather than Thursday, that might be helpful.
Because really, the intent was not only to digest it, but to make meetings smoother by calling staff members
Right,
if need
having
be.
time. Right.
And not taking up more of our time during a board session and saying, hey, could you please address this or this, and kind of eliminate some of those issues.
Now, just one contrarian thing to think about is if something goes up on the agenda earlier in the week and then an emergency comes up, we have to add a lot of stuff at the end of the week. How difficult is it to pull something off once it's been published? And maybe members of the public are expecting to see it on the agenda. I'm not
No,
necessarily...
I'm sorry, I misspoke on what I said earlier. When I activate an agenda, the board and administration gets it. It does not go out public until Friday.
Oh.
And that's an automatic thing through board docs. I could change that I could make it earlier if I wanted to, but that it's set up because
That's
we
the
don't have to
legal
post it for 40, it doesn't have to be, it has to be posted 48 hours ahead of time. So they've set it so that when I activate it, the board can see it, the administrators can see it, but the public can't see it until Friday.
Which is fine, because
Right.
Sure.
Right.
We may have some nice-to-get to issues, and then something comes up. We don't want to be here till 11 o'clock
And
doing
we've,
the nice-to-get to
and
issues.
we've done that. We've added things at the last minute, changed things that were added, the memo has changed, we've done that at the last minute. That's the nice thing about board docs is we have that flexibility. But that, I just remembered that it does not go public until Friday.
Well, that's helpful.
That helps a lot.
Very helpful.
Should we start with number 1 then?
that's fine.
Well, I'll jump in to say, I'll do my best on number 2. I interrupt too, so I definitely interrupt people. So we should stop doing that. I should stop doing that. And if a majority of you wish, I'll keep a little sheet and make sure that everyone has a chance to speak once before I allow someone to speak twice. If that's the majority consensus, I have no problem doing that. If we think that'll help, and if it doesn't help, we can try something different.
Not to jump ahead, but I prefer we do that rather than get a sergeant at arms.
Absolutely.
I agree.
I think really to have you police us, that's a strong term, but
Yeah.
keep us well-behaved, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah,
I had
one
no-
and 4 are, and we'll see how it works.
I guess I might say...
To cooperate.
I might say that I like the idea of making sure everyone speaks before someone else has a second chance, but...
Just given the opportunity to.
Right. But I think the most important aspect is that we make sure that everybody who feels like they have something to say has an opportunity to do that. And so I'm more interested in this item from that standpoint as opposed to the idea that we're trying to make meetings go by quicker.
Right.
And so that would be my comment on that.
And I'm not sure number 3 is, if everybody gets a chance to speak, I think that'll
Right.
take care of itself.
Right, I had a no at the time box.
I don't really care for that.
Okay, and my comments on number 2, I don't know.
Bill?
Sorry.
We had somebody down here.
So we have to
I already
improve
looked it
your
up,
line of
sorry.
vision.
That is...
Yeah, I would amend that just a little bit because it would be on, so say, Mike says something and then I have a response to Mike, but Keith wants to talk about something else. We have to keep on, that we can't adhere to that 100%. It has to be more tailored to the flow of conversation and discussion.
I agree with Dex. It's the thread consistency of the conversation.
Yeah.
We could end up going off on different tangents, and the original tangent never gets gotten back to if there's 2 different aspects of a topic. I think that just requires sensitivity and awareness of the flow of the conversation.
I think that also falls under Robert's rules. There are questions, if Member Davenport is speaking, Robert's Rules of Order would say, may ask the member a question about what he was just talking about, and you are free to do that. So it's not, you're not really taking up your time, but you're just asking a question, either for clarification or anything further.
And this that just happened, that you couldn't see
Right.
Nancy. I know we have to be cognizant of the television coverage and all of that, but if there would be a little better way so that you could see people, because
Yeah.
that
Up
also...
with car mirrors.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, put you at the head.
More of an oval to the shape of the room somehow.
It used to be.
It's hard because of the camera.
I know.
That's why
Okay, anybody else?
it's this way.
We could figure something out.
Okay. I'll just say, I really don't like the idea of a hard 15-minute time limit. The idea of having staff try to be more concise is always good, you know, but I don't necessarily want to make it a hard and fast rule. Anybody else?
But, you know, it might not be a bad idea if the staff member knows that the presentation is going to be 20 minutes or a half hour, maybe if they would speak to Dr. McDonald and let them know, and he could maybe counsel them on whether or not that's a good idea. You know, if they have very useful information that's going to take 20 minutes to convey, I definitely want to hear that. I don't want to cut them short because they have a 15-minute time limit. So can we refer that to you, Dr. McDonald?
Certainly.
Well, a variation on that could require that each staff member give an estimated time, at the time that they submit, you know, in advance, and then we can see how close you come.
And really, if they can say it in 7 minutes, well, more power to them.
Right.
I think going beyond that, is it 15 minutes for the staff member to talk, or is it 15 minutes from the talk and then unlimited time for board members to take questions? So I think that's, is it question and answer? Is it, no, because I think really, it's important. I think the impetus is, do we want the staff members to rehash all the documentation and all the PowerPoints that they're putting up for us? And I think professionally, we don't want to waste their time. I think really was the point of even suggesting this, that we've read what you've had, and we should be able to discern certain points if we have enough time to look at it in advance or to ask them questions in advance to kind of get to the particulars.
And that goes back to getting the items to us ahead of time.
Everybody should just be aware of the time.
I might make a point, too, with all this, is that, and it was kind of touched on a little bit earlier, is that as much as we're trying to streamline the meetings and be efficient, the presentations are as much for us as they are for the community. Right. And so, as much as we have an opportunity to review things in detail, maybe ahead of time, the public maybe doesn't. And having presentation during the meeting does serve, you know, a greater purpose other than just informing us. And so that's so thinking about 15 minutes is like we came up with 15 minutes. Why is 15 minutes the number? Why is it 17 minutes or 10 minutes or what? So I think I like the idea of maybe having some idea ahead of time about how long it's going to take, and the idea just that staff would be coming with the idea, be as succinct as possible, maybe more well-spoken than I am in terms of getting your idea across. I can be a little wordy.
But aren't these documents also going to be posted for the public to view as well?
Sure.
Either in advance or post-meeting?
Right. Sure.
Well,
so
it saves them time too, so they can also get, you know, the Cliff Notes, the Reader's Digest version, and get the most discernible questions at the same time.
I'm good with the Cliff Notes and trying to be as succinct as possible. That's
because they're busy too.
Right.
You know, I'm going to look at this. I know. Wow, this is a 2-hour meeting. You know, and move that little cursor around. Okay, here we go. This is the part that I want.
Well, there could be nights too when there's more time available for presentations versus other nights when there isn't, and so I think that needs to be taken into account as well. I'm sorry, Terry, you were about to say something.
Well, the other side to that is maybe some of the public may not quite understand what the presentation is about to begin with, and even if they do have the Cliff Notes or the presentations, it might be difficult for them to understand. You know, I'm not trying to disregard anyone, but you know, they might need a little more background information to understand exactly what we're presenting. And so, you know, I hate to cut that part short too, because especially with technology and some of the other topics that we've even covered tonight, people may not understand exactly what we're trying to get across. So I don't want to cut that short either.
And that's why we have phone numbers and emails. And they
Well,
can contact
I think
us.
it's just it's a nice idea, because I know when Dr. McDonald and Bill meet to go over the agenda. It will give you an idea if your staff, whatever the agenda item is on there, whether it's, Mr. Stanlin giving a presentation, and he can give you a time frame. It's a nice way to plan your agenda as to how long it's going to be, or maybe a certain item might have to go to next month if it looks like it's going to be too lengthy, It just gives you a little bit of a rough plan,
Having each staff members estimate the time of the presentation and put that on the
Because
side and just add them up.
quite frankly, in the years that I've been on the board, we have had some presentations by staff, administrative staff, that have gone on for, almost an hour. So, and that is something that Dr. McDonald will, you talk to your administrative staff every day, so, when you're looking at it and asking them what they're going to be putting there, you'll get an idea about that, and that way when you're doing the agenda, you'll know it'll be able to fit in somewhat of a time, because I don't think anybody on this board minds. It's not to say that we need to be done exactly at 9:30, because we're all hightailing. We're just cognizant of the fact that none of us wants to be here until 11 o'clock, so if we can just make things succinct, and so if we're getting out of here at 9:45 or 10 to 10 and we're done, so be it.
I think that fits the time box idea, that we're not going to impose a rigid time box, but that we may try a flexible time box to estimate in advance of the meeting how long an item is supposed to take. And that way then, and that no one's held to it, but it gives us a benchmark to measure against. If somebody's routinely going over their numbers, well, then they probably maybe aren't estimating right.
No specific time.
I think 4 we talked. Anybody else want to add about 4 before we skip on?
Yeah, just strike that.
Yeah.
Okay.
No volunteers to be sergeant?
I want to make sort of an overview comment about 5 and 6, and then maybe is that basically I see a conflict between two audiences with this one. All communication should be made with the idea of who it is you're communicating with, and we have a conflict. Well, not really. There's a disconnection between the business meeting aspect of this, and 5 and 6 do not advance the business meeting purpose, but nonetheless they serve a very valuable purpose in reaching out to the public and the community. So how we balance that, and again, just the magic of YouTube, it seemed to me that doing a series of all about learning videos, which are available to the entire community, the process of having a department preparing one of those is itself educational and professionally developing for them, and there could be a carousel of videos on the website to inform the community about what's happening in the math department, what's happening in the English department, what's happening in the music department, so that we don't have to have half an hour here, but then there'd also be greater opportunity for more departments to actually try to do it. Now, I just kind of made that up, so I don't know if everybody wants to do it or not. So, maybe no one wants to do it, and that's fine. But that's just, a way that just for example, the Common Core math presentation that we had, I thought was marvelous. And I wanted to know that.
You wouldn't have not wanted to have seen that.
Right. And more important, I would have not wanted them not to have prepared it, because their preparation of that was itself beneficial, I believe, for the department. But we don't have enough time to let everybody do that and have them come here and speak to us in person. So maybe there's another way that then, and that would also enhance the reputation of the district, because it would show all the wonderful things we're doing.
I do like the idea of putting presentations on the website if staff wants to do it.
Oh, it won't make anybody do it, no.
That's right. But on the other hand, with the math presentation, there was a chance for us again to ask questions and get a clearer understanding, and that's what we would miss if we didn't have those presentations with us. So
risk of going around, just a super fast comment.
But I don't mind moving them to workshop nights. I think that everybody would then get the same type of information and good works being done at a workshop. Like tonight, we could have maybe a few more folks in the audience even because of it. I'm just throwing that out there. Or we could even have some presentations maybe at the quarterly events.
Our open houses.
I would agree that I think we could do both of these to a workshop instead of a business meeting. I think we'd probably be asking staff to do, go above and beyond if we had some kind of monthly focus. August is math month, and September is science, and October is social studies, and there's some kind of focus. If staff is willing, to do that, obviously I'd be going above and beyond. But I think we do need that connection. I think, whether we have students, in the schools or not, personally, I think we should. I think we have an obligation to know, and I think for many of our community members, especially our seniors, they have an obligation. They want to know too, and not just when they get invited for Veterans or Distinguished Citizen Days, so that they have a continuation of what's going on. Can we have them as succinct to some of our staff reports, 15 or 20 minutes? That probably would be beneficial too. Mostly because I know that they're probably more nervous than our staff members who make regular reports and things like that. So I think that might cut down on some anxiety as well.
Go ahead, Nancy.
I was just going to say that I would not like to see either of these go away. I am fine with moving it to a workshop day. I do think we should give a time limit. And if it is such that our agenda happens to be lighter on a business meeting and Dr. McDonald feels that...
Use your discretion, right.
That it's going to fit, we've got enough time, boom, put it on.
Yep.
Have an extra one.
Or have an extra one.
That's way too.
Mike, will you say something?
What Nancy said.
Okay.
Ditto. It just, and I think a lot of it just falls on Bill and Dr. McDonald to overlook the schedule and just make.
You guys just take care of
Make good choices.
Make good choices.
Get back to us.
As we tell our children as they go out the door.
Are we okay with 5 and 6? Anything else on 5 and 6? Okay, 7. I offered one idea. Anybody have any others?
Well, I think for 7, if I would like to speak, I think I do not want to eliminate the quarterly financial reports. I think that's an extremely important part of our job is to, in monitoring, letting the public see. I think it would be a transparency issue. I like it that it's done in the public setting. I would not want it to go away.
And really, I don't think Mark really...
He never takes that, I mean...
Goes over.
How long do you take, Mark?
He's improved.
Yes. They're always very valuable, Mark. So.
Oh, no, I'm fine
Any
either
other
way.
comments? Anybody else want to jump in on this one? Going once, going twice?
We like
Okay.
his reports.
Item 8, and in the same context, though, what Mrs. Boyle said also applies to bid approvals. I mean, if we're going to approve spending $975,000 on something, to stick it in the consent agenda doesn't seem right.
Absolutely.
Not against.
I agree.
Agree.
I think we already talked, any contrary opinion on 8?
And I don't
Or
think,
other
I don't think we spend a lot of time on them.
No.
No.
An inordinate amount of time.
Some of them are fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and usually...
I like to know how many rolls of toilet paper we use.
Yeah, Marty usually gives us a very succinct report, too.
Anybody else on 8? Okay, 9, I think we talked about 9 already. Anything else we have to add about 9?
I just think if we can add those policies to the consent agenda, that might save us 2 minutes. It's hard to say.
Yeah, but then we could lose that time back if one was controversial and we spent a lot of time.
I know, I'm kidding,
off the
really.
consent agenda. So sort of omnibus them, I think, might work, but down in the new business or old business part.
Yeah.
But probably on second reading is where we would save the time, because I think we would need to hear it first time.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
we
no,
have
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. First reading's presentation.
But
second-
we
only
also,
kidding
we
about the
also
amount of
found out we
time.
could do them all together anyway. So that saves a lot of time, because if you have 5 or 6 of them that we're doing at a time, reading them alone takes time.
I remember that one meeting.
Mondays.
Really?
Yeah.
Right, if you'd
Busy, huh?
indulge me, if I could just paraphrase what I've heard, so
Absolutely.
I know what I'm...
Absolutely.
Number 1 has support. Number 2 has support with reason. Number 3 is a no. 4 is a no. 5 and 6, there's several ideas. One idea, I think I heard an idea to leave it as is. I think I heard an idea to move it to workshop meetings. I think I heard an idea to look for meetings where there isn't a strong agenda, or a big agenda at the business meeting. I'm not sure I heard a consensus on either one of these, except they're important.
I think the consensus we were all putting up our thumb was that you would use your discretion, and then I think we would be fine either in a workshop or a board meeting for that. if it fits into either or agenda on either or evening. I
Okay.
think we all think it's important to hear. We don't care which night it's on.
Okay.
Some
Or
constraints
both.
on time.
Or
Yeah,
both.
or both, right.
But I think-
Whatever fits.
I think workshop has an advantage, though, because it's not as common to have a closed session ahead of time, so the student perspective can start at 7
Excellent point.
rather than 7:30.
That's an
So,
excellent point.
so while it's okay either one, workshops are probably far more likely to
Yes.
fit. And so I got the sense that the idea of
That would be
moving
first
to a
choice.
workshop. And again, this is something you can see this is not really a board decision at this point, but I would throw out the idea that there may be other departments that would like to do something like this, like it's all about learning, that we just can't fit them all in. So
That's an interesting idea, and we have talked about that for some other
So to find an alternate venue
concepts.
using video might be a way, because we may have more than 5 or 6 or 8 that would like to do it.
Especially if it showcases our students' work.
Yeah.
The more you see something in action, I think that's the best story.
So the best come to us, and the rest go on the video, on the web.
Okay, I've heard that we want to keep 7 and 8,
Yes.
Yes.
and 9 makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
And that you want the administration as much as possible to week ahead, perhaps as a target, but as close to a week ahead as possible, especially for the large reports that require a lot of time to read and decipher. Does that pretty much capture it?
Everybody agree with that, basically?
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
Anyone add anything before we move to the next item? That's okay. Item 3C, it's not totally unrelated, student staff recognition and board open house programs.
This will probably not be as immediate topic. However, as the board is aware, we've been considering other ways to interact with the public different than Bagels with the Board on Saturday mornings. We've come up with a concept whereby we move from 4 recognitions a year to 3, understanding that the 2 fall recognitions tend to be very light, and have those recognition programs on the Monday between the workshop and board meeting at 7 o'clock. And following those recognition programs, we would have a board open house where the community could come and interact with the board. And because we typically get very nice crowds of parents and community members at those open houses, or the recognition programs, it does provide us, in a sense, a captive audience of people who are interested in the school district, who are already there, who might come and interact with the board. That's a positive. In talking to our attorney, Shelley Anderson of Franzik, there are a couple issues, and they regard the Open Meetings Act. One of the reasons the Bagels with the Board worked was there are 2 board members, not more than 2, and therefore it could not be a board meeting with only 2 board members. More than 2 board members, it became a board meeting, and we would have to have an agenda, otherwise we'd be in violation of the Open Meetings Act. So 2 worked, and so obviously, as a concern, an open meetings concern with a program like this, one way to do it would be to have 5 of the board members take their leave and 2 remain and be involved in the open house. Another way to do it, however, and this sounds more cumbersome than perhaps it would be, is that board members would have to segregate themselves in groups of 1 and 2. And we'd have to be in different parts of the room. And we'd have to inform the public that we could not have more than 2 board members talking with them at once. And we could assign administrative personnel to each group of board members. In that way, we would not be in violation of the Open Meetings Act as long as we did not discuss board business at the meeting, and as long as we did not have more than 2 board members interacting with any group of people at the same time. Now, on its face, that sounds kind of funky. I acknowledge that, but you know, that's one place where the Open Meetings Act makes it difficult for us to do this kind of business. So my recommendation would be to try to do this in the way that we actually we're all participating, we segregate ourselves, we find a location in the school where we can do that relatively successfully, and then we see how this works. But, again, this is kind of your program too, so wanted to get your input about it.
I won't go first this time, anybody else?
So even if it's posted, we can't be together?
Right.
Well, if we were all together, we'd have to take notes. We'd have to take minutes, not notes.
That's right.
We'd have to have a formal reception of visitors. If there's any discussion about board business with more than 2 people, that would be a
Yeah.
violation.
I don't think, it doesn't sound terribly cumbersome to split us all up into different areas.
Right.
I'd certainly be willing to give that a try. I would promise not to go gather the 3
I
of them.
promise. I think I mentioned at the last board meeting, it was really no different than like the open house that we had at North when we were first discussing the facilities, because there were different stations, and if we minded our own station with either a fellow board member or another administrative personnel, I think we'd be just fine.
I agree with that. I think the other question I would have is one about proximity and location. I would hate for some members to be, let's say it's at South High in the gym, and then somebody's all the way in the cafeteria, and somebody's out in the auditorium, somebody's up on the 3rd floor. I mean, I think as long as we're in groups, and I mean, I don't see why we couldn't use an auditorium with stations within, or a gymnasium with stations within, instead of having to be in 5 or 6 different places.
Right. Yeah, that's
I
how I
would definitely be in favor of that.
I'm thinking like 10 yards is enough separation.
Right, it's just like we had the open house here, when we do ours, we'd be in the
And we're going to have an
cafeteria.
assigned administrator being our keeper.
It's all separated, right?
Yeah,
I think we do have an obligation to the public, and I think they want to see us, and not just 2 at a time. And especially when we're talking 3 instances, throughout the year, I think it's advantageous for everyone involved.
I'd really be willing to give that a try.
To go beyond this point, though, I would say this is a forum for, it's all about learning presentations as well. The different departments can set up booths, different locations around the room.
We did talk
About
about
that.
it.
Or student perspectives, too.
We had talked about having a theme to the meeting. Concern would be if board members are asked about the theme and they don't know as much as, so, I mean, well, it's.
Right, it's true.
You're sort of in a position where you're supposed to know everything, but it's not possible to know every detail. And I don't want to create a situation where board members don't know about something when they're asked a question, even though Keith might know, but Mike doesn't know, or Mark Stalen might know, but Debbie doesn't know, and
Yeah.
so there is some consternation about, well, if we have a theme, then do all the board members have to be up to speed in complete detail so they
I
can
never feel bad
speak?
about that, though.
No.
Yeah.
I appreciate the sentiment. I mean, truly, I do. But as a board member, I mean, I can be asked a question at any time by anybody about anything, and I think I don't know that at least the people I talk to don't have the assumption that I would have all the answers, and I don't pretend that I do. You want to be able to point them in the right direction, and I think we're all capable of doing that. So I wouldn't have that concern. I wouldn't want to be, there's 2 people, go take your corners, and we're all just standing there. So I think there needs to be some sort of theme to the evening. So I
was thinking we would clearly have some informational.
Okay.
And that's why the videos is a really interesting idea too. Or we can have there's a variety of things that we're engaged in at any one time that we could display.
Are we being innovative in all this, or has this been done before? Do we know?
I think we're being innovative.
I like to think that we are, but on the other hand, if we know of other instances where similar things have gone down like this, then it would give us some guidance in how we're doing what we're doing. Legal aspects.
Many of us have worked in other school districts. I don't recall anything like this in the places I've been.
I've never heard of it.
Cutting edge.
Since Ben or Evan's been or Mark.
We're reaching out.
Everyone should have a quarterly financial report as one of the booths.
But I think going beyond that, I think maybe what else Mike might be getting at is that it's an opportunity to showcase something within our schools that maybe the general public, whether it's people that have parents with students in our schools or the community at large, can come visit our schools in a very non-threatening way to say,
Right.
this is what we're doing, we're very proud of this. Oh, and by the way, you can talk to these elected officials as well about anything, or our staff members about anything. I don't want to put an undue burden on staff, meaning particularly our teachers and our students, but if there's something that we can showcase and highlight some more positive aspects that we're doing, I think that's a great opportunity, especially if it's only 3 times throughout the year.
Student newspapers,
Sure.
whatever, all sorts of
Absolutely.
things.
Could also be some coordination with understanding who the audience is that evening, in particular, who's going to be there. Parents of kids' French club or whatever it is, whatever those recognition things that we're doing, we might be able to put some things together that we know would be particularly relevant to some of the people who we know are going to be there.
And every key communicator should be told in advance what people will be there, as well as all the local media, so that they can come and basically do a one-evening
Publicize.
tour of a great many things that is happening.
And I think the template for this was the North High Open House.
Right. Yes.
So that provides us with some insight of what is it going to feel like.
Yep.
You know, but also the Woodridge Village has their open house
Yeah.
that you
That's
participated
right, their public
in,
forum,
too.
right,
So it was
exactly.
the same, it's like a trade show for us.
That's true.
And so the themes will be with each station and each administrator, so, you know, we'll map it out and have it very clear as to what will be discussed, and we'll have talking points.
And every 20 minutes, we can rotate stations.
It's great. It's wonderful. I'm really excited. I'm really excited about it.
We could make some money.
tomato
Could be a little fundraiser.
This is more of a brainstorming session, I think. Anybody have anything they want to add? I mean, I think we're not going to settle
Well,
everything.
I think sometimes there are some relevant topics. I know when my children were in school and Dr. McDonald had the parent advisory board, there were several times that you wanted input from the community about certain things, and this might be an opportunity, you know, to ask those sort of questions also and get their feedback right away with a larger parent group rather than just the 20 or 30 parents, you know, at North or South that would do that. So I think this would be a really great opportunity for that.
Very well. Anybody else want to add anything? I missed my shot at a 90-minute
Great.
meeting, but I'm close. Anybody else want to add anything? I think we move now to reception of visitors. Oh, see any, we don't work for the district. Okay, reception of visitors is closed. Is there any announcements or anything? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Member Beckman moves.
Second.
Member Pevas, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Meeting adjourned.